Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting for Wednesday, March the 19th. If I could please ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to reconvene at 6:30 p.m. Moved by Councillor Drudge, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Hello and welcome, everyone, those that are online and those in person. Earlier tonight, we opened the meeting for council to discuss closed session matters, and we're now at the planning public consultation portion of the agenda. I would like to advise that this part of the meeting is being live streamed, audio and video recorded, and shall form part of the record, which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And for more information about that collection, please contact the clerk's office. I'll now ask Councillor Waters to provide the land acknowledgement statement.
Thank you, Your Worship. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that the town is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beaujolais First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home of many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of the Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you, Councillor. There are 3 items on the agenda tonight. The first item is for information and public consultation purposes only, and no decision will be made. The 2 other items concerning proposed amendments to the town's community planning permitting system, which I'm going to call CPPS because it's just too much of a mouthful. Our Shore, bylaw number 062-17, and recommendations are being considered by council this evening. The first item concerns the town's community benefit charges bylaw. We will start with a presentation by Hemson's Consulting Incorporated, and then we will have an opportunity to hear from members of the public. All speakers, and this goes for all 3 public meetings, all speakers will have 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your concerns, and then staff or the consultant will respond where possible. Should anyone need to speak for a second time to identify an issue that has not already been raised or to receive clarification, they'll be given an additional 5 minutes after everyone has had a turn. Although with the amount of public in the gallery tonight, I don't think that's going to be a particular issue. After all members of the public have provided comments, council will provide any comments they may have. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email Clerk's Services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and will be taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party and will be updated on any future information regarding the item. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is available on tonight's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from Clerk Patty Toma on how the public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Notice for this public meeting was provided through an advertisement on innisfiltoday.ca on February 27, 2025, and on the town's website. The associated draft bylaw was publicly available the week of March 5th, 2025.
Thank you. Has any correspondence been received concerning this item?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. And no, the clerk's office has not received any correspondence regarding this item. Members of the public may still provide comments or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you, Clerk Toma. We'll now hear from Jacqueline Hall of Hemson Consulting, who will provide further context to the Community Benefits Charge Review. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. It's a pleasure to be before you today. My name is Jacqueline Hall. I'm an associate at Hemson Consulting. We are the firm who completed the town's community benefits charges strategy back in 2023. I know that was a little bit ago, but not too long ago. And I'm here tonight to present the review of the strategy. If we go to the next slide. As the mayor so appropriately pointed out, the purpose of today's meeting is to fulfill a requirement of the Planning Act. The purpose is to review the CBC strategy. The memorandum of the review has been posted on the town's CBC landing page. And what is required under the Planning Act is a regular review of the CBC bylaw. Once enacted, the CBC bylaw does not expire. However, it has to be reviewed every 5 years. If this review is not completed, the bylaw is deemed to have expired, and therefore the whole process starts over again and a new bylaw has to be enacted. The purpose of doing this review now, we're not quite at that 5-year end of the 5-year review period yet, but the purpose of doing the review now is to update the assumptions that we used in the CBC strategy back in 2023 to align with a couple of different things. So the first being the development charges background study. That was also done in 2023, but it was done after the CBC was completed. And so these two revenue tools are separate, but they are interrelated. And so what we want to do is make sure that what was reflected in the DC background study is now also appropriately reflected in the community benefits charges strategy. There was a bit of just an awkward timing there, just wanting to make sure that we had the CBC bylaw in place. So we're doing our due diligence and coming back to have that update completed. We are also aligning the revenue that we anticipated for the CBC related charges, which is set at 4% of the land value. There was an appeal of the CBC bylaw when it was enacted. Through the appeal process, there was a settlement that was reached, and the rates that were identified in the CBC bylaw were changed somewhat. And so what we wanted to do through this exercise as well is to demonstrate that we still meet the requirements of the legislation, which is setting the rate at a per unit amount, which does not exceed the overall cap of 4% of the land value. The public consultation as part of this review does require, the Planning Act does require that we have public consultation as part of this review, and this meeting has been called in order to satisfy that requirement. So if we go to the next slide, now that I've done a little bit of a preamble, I have a very short presentation just to go over the findings of the review and then what we have put forth in the memorandum, as well as our recommendations for council's consideration. At a later date, not at the meeting this evening, but at a later date, council will be asked to pass a resolution as to whether or not the bylaw can remain as is or if any changes are needed. So we'll talk about that recommendation at the end. I'll provide just a little bit more of an overview about what community benefits charges are, the capital program adjustments that we've made, the rate structure that is in the current bylaw or recommending to continue into the future, an overview of the revenue estimates, and then we'll end everything with next steps as well. Next slide. So a community benefits charge is a relatively new revenue tool. It's been around for a few years now, but those of you who have been around for a while might remember Section 37 under the Planning Act being related to height and density bonusing. That's what we used to call it. Community benefits charges effectively have replaced that section of the Planning Act. And so with it came a whole host of different requirements from the old Section 37. So a community benefits charge is imposed by a bylaw. There's no individual agreements that used to happen under the old Section 37. Only local municipalities can levy a CBC charge. It requires a strategy, which we completed in 2023, and in-kind contributions are permitted. That effectively just means that a applicant or a developer can come in and rather than paying the rate, they can provide infrastructure so long as it was identified in the strategy and it is agreed upon by the municipality. CBCs are a bit of a different revenue tool here in Ontario. They can only be levied against development that is higher density in nature. So Two qualifications have to be met. The development has to have 5 or more stories and 10 or more residential units. So both of those need to be achieved in order for a CBC to be paid for on a particular development. The regulation sets the cap at 4% of the land value. We are allowed to implement a per unit rate, but the regulation says that we cannot charge more than 4% of the land value the day before the building permit is issued. That is intended to reflect all the height and density permissions that would be on a site, recognizing that that can take some time through the planning process. So that's why we use the day before the first building permit is issued as that point in time. The land value, as I said, reflects all of the zoning and density permissions on the site as well. And so therefore, the 4% cap is applied to that. Next slide. Just moving to the CBC capital program, I appreciate there's a lot of numbers here on the slide, and really the summary is, I'll just walk everyone through the table and what it shows, but effectively what we've done is we've identified various CBC services. This is consistent with what was shown in 2023 with some minor refinements to account for how we've organized projects and also recognizing how we've categorized them for the purposes of the development charges background study. So eligible services in the municipality include things such as public art, greenhouses, events equipment, lighting improvements, affordable housing, traffic calming measures, community facilities and urban parks, public realm improvements, as well as a number of other services that are eligible for development charge recovery, but are not fully funded through development charges. And so the columns you see on the top of the chart here identify the total cost of all of the projects we've identified. So they total about $105 million. There is about $1.5 million from grants, subsidies, and other recoveries. Those have to be reduced from the eligible costs. We take that off. There's also this notion of benefit to existing shares. That simply reflects that there are shares of projects that will benefit the existing residents of the town, and therefore it's not appropriate for us to ask future development to then pay for those shares of the projects. So that also comes off. Once we make those adjustments, we arrive at what we call our total development-related cost, which is the amount that is attributed to future growth. And then we look at any costs that are funded through development charges. So we've effectively adjusted the program to include projects that have not been funded from development charges. Anything that's in the DC regime sits in that program now. And other funding sources would effectively include property taxes, potentially future development charge revenues if they were permitted for those services, recognizing that the CBC eligible costs, which are shown on the far right-hand side of the slide, has to reflect the servicing that is attributed to CBC units only. So recognizing that only developments with 5 or more stories and 10 or more residential units are paying the CBC rate, we have to apportion the infrastructure costs to those units as part of this work. And so that's where the total CBC eligible costs have been identified. Next slide. So looking at the anticipated revenues for CBCs, we are looking at a 10-year planning horizon. We're keeping it consistent with the planning horizon we used for the purposes of the strategy in 2023. And what we've done is there's 2 separate rates that are applied within the town. So one is for the Orbit Secondary Plan area. This reflects the fact that there are a number of projects in that area that will exceed the height and density that we would see elsewhere in the municipality, and it's a very specific development with unique servicing demands. So we've attributed a specific rate for those areas. All other areas of the town would attract a different rate, which is set at $800. The Orbit Secondary Plan area rate is intended to be phased in based on certain milestones being met, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. But we've used an average of $900 a unit to estimate what we think the revenue would be for the municipality over the 10-year planning horizon. And so what we've done is the overwhelming majority of these units will be located within the Orbit Secondary Plan area. And we've identified roughly that the town will collect about just shy of 4 million, so 3.9 million over the 10-year planning horizon in community benefits charges revenues. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there is a requirement that we cannot exceed 4% of the land value. And in identifying the rates and when we first established the bylaw and through discussions with the industry, we did develop per unit rate calculations that are intended to not offend that 4% legislative cap. So as I showed on the previous slide, we have about $98 million in CBC eligible infrastructure. Our anticipated revenue is only 3.9 or almost about $4 million. That shows that we are not anticipating to collect more than the 4% legislated cap. And so therefore our CBC eligible costs exceed our revenues. And so this just shows that interrelationship. This is something we see virtually with every municipality in Ontario, recognizing that that cap is in place. This is a limited revenue tool when compared to other charges such as development charges. Next slide. So just talking a little bit about the rate structure that I mentioned. So this is now in the bylaw that has been adjudicated before the Ontario Land Tribunal. The Orbit Secondary Plan area will be subject to an $800 per unit rate initially. After the first building permit is issued for the GO station, that charge will then increase to $900 a unit. And then once the GO station becomes operational, the charge will then increase to $950 a unit. All other development occurring throughout the town that meets that 5 or more stories with 10 or more residential units would pay the $800 per unit. And all of this is set out in your current bylaw. We're not recommending any changes to this rate structure. But we just wanted to make it known as part of the review that this is the current rate structure that's in place and what we're proposing to bring forward. The town still has the right to levy the 4% of land charge instead of the flat fee, subject to certain conditions. But regardless, we still are capped at that 4% of land value that's legislated through the Planning Act and its associated regulation. If there's ever an issue with that, developers or applicants do have mechanisms under the Planning Act to propose a complaint or to file a complaint against the rate. And there's a number of specific rules and actions that have to be followed in order to resolve those types of disputes. Next slide. So our recommendation for the council resolution, this is will be considered by council at a later date, is that no changes need to be made to the town's current bylaw based on our review of the capital program, the anticipated revenues, and the updates that we have brought forward. There's no changes to the implementation or the rate structure as currently identified. And effectively, once council passes this resolution, that 5-year review clock starts again. So in 5 years' time, we'll come back and we'll do a similar exercise just to ensure that the rate structure and the bylaw is still reasonable and appropriate. Next slide. And just quickly, in terms of where we've been with the project and then where we're going. So we did make the memorandum available on the town's website on March 5th. We are holding a public consultation today on this matter, and we do anticipate that the resolution of council will be brought forward in about a month's time on the April 23rd council agenda. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hall. We will hear next from members of the public who have questions or would like to provide comments regarding this item. I understand no one has registered to speak virtually, so I'll ask if any person in attendance here at Town Hall wishes to come forward to the podium to provide comment. And if so, please do state your name for the record. Anyone have a comment on the CBC? Seeing none, I'll ask if the clerk, if you've received any emails since this presentation started.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and no correspondence has been received during the course of this meeting.
Thank you. I'll now go to council with any questions or comments. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. You, in your list of your CBC rates and stuff, you have affordable housing. Would accessible housing be slid in under that banner as well, or could it be made its own?
Ms. Hall?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. It's a good question. So the categories that we have identified are intended to represent various projects that could fall within that project type. So affordable housing, I believe would potentially include, I believe you said, is it attainable housing? Apologies,
Accessible housing.
Accessible housing, my apologies. I believe it would fall under that umbrella. We might just need to have just a quick discussion internally just to ensure that the description of that work would indeed fall under that category, but I don't foresee that being an issue.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. Thanks very much for the presentation, very clear and concise. My first question has to do with the 4% versus the per unit rate that we have there. Is there a time difference between when we get that fee from the developer? Are they due at the exact same time, or is one due prior before?
Ms. Hall?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Another great question. And perhaps it was a bit confusing the way I laid it out in the presentation. So I just would like to ensure that, so we are imposing a per unit rate on development for the CBC. It is capped at 4% of the land value. So if there ever was a scenario where the rates that were calculated for a development were to exceed that 4%, it would effectively be capped at that amount, so they would not pay more than the 4%. In any event, the CBC is collected at first building permit issuance. So it's consistent with how the development charges are also administered.
Thank you. And my second question has to be with the, we say we charge it anything over 5 stories. Is there any rate differential for a 10-story versus a 15-story versus a 20-story in terms of, I would think, and this is just my personal opinion, that the higher the building, the more density, the more people, the more demands on the community. So is it just that one rate and that's it? We don't get a chance to charge if we get 40 stories?
Ms. Hall?
Yes, through the mayor. So the CBC rates are based on a per unit assessment. So if you have a 10-story building with 10 units, you wouldn't necessarily have that, or with 20 units, they're going to pay a rate based on the number of units that are identified in that building. If we were to go to a 20 or 40-story building, it would obviously accommodate additional additional units, and so there would be additional revenue from those units. I did mention on the slide 7, I believe it was, where I set out the rate structure. The town does have the ability to levy the 4% cap, so the 4% of the value of the land charge under specific circumstances. So if there was ever an application where it seemed as though the town might undercollect from what is permitted in the legislation, there is that fallback. So there wouldn't necessarily ever be a point in time where the town would collect less than what the legislation would allow the town to do.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? I have 2, actually, Ms. Hall. One of them is, we had a presentation once, quite a while ago now, about hospital charges, or the local share of a hospital being a community benefits charge, which I didn't see in there. Is that something municipalities do, or other municipalities have done?
Yes, great question. So it certainly is a service that has been examined by other municipalities. At this time, we do not, you're correct, we do not have a program or a service area identified for a hospital expenditure. It is something that we could potentially look at as part of the review, but at this time, it is not included in the list.
Thank you. And I believe development charges are indexed for inflation. Are the CBCs indexed for inflation?
Yes, it is a very good question. So since the town is using a dollar per unit value, which is a bit different than how some other municipalities structure the charges at 4% of the land value. There is a provision in the bylaw, I believe. I will confirm the exact location, but I believe that there is a provision in the bylaw that allows for annual indexing. That was in the original bylaw and also in the bylaw that was brought forward as part of the mediation. And I believe the index factor is consistent with what we use for the development charges rate. So these per unit rates will index accordingly into the future as well over the life of the bylaw or whenever it is amended in the future. However, we still are capped at that 4% of land value.
Understood. Thank you so much. Looking around for any other questions, so I'm not seeing any. So we'll now go to the recommendation to receive the comments provided this evening. And can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Zanella and Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That is carried. Anyone who wishes to provide comment regarding the community benefits charge review may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council by contacting the clerk's office at clerksoffice@innisfil.ca or signing up on the form on the table outside the council chambers. So I believe we saw that it was coming back on April 23rd. So if you have any comments, please provide them prior to that date. We'll now move to the second item on tonight's agenda, which concerns a proposed amendment to the town's CPPS, Our Shores bylaw 062-17 for 3437 Crescent Harbor Road. This application is being recommended for council's consideration tonight. We'll start with a presentation from staff, and then the consultant on behalf of the applicant will be invited to speak. Then we'll have an opportunity for public consultation where we will hear from members of the public. And again, all speakers will have 5 minutes for your initial questions, and once everyone has had an opportunity, you can come up and identify any other issues you have. Council will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments, and then council will consider the recommendation. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email Clerk Services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a decision this evening. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from Clerk Toma on how public notice on this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Notice for this public meeting was provided by mailing to residents within 120 meters of the subject land on February 26, 2025. Information and materials respecting the application were also posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you, Clerk Toma. Has any correspondence been received by the Clerk Services concerning this item?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. And yes, we have received and circulated correspondence to council and staff from Sal and Jody Napolitano expressing various concerns regarding impacts associated with the proposed amendment. As well, your worship, members of the public may provide comments or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or up until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you. We'll now hear from our presenters regarding this application. First, Ingrid Lee, Development Planner for the Town of Innisfil, will provide a high-level summary of the application. Then Nick Scarrett, Senior Planner for Innovative Planning Solutions, will provide further planning context on behalf of the applicant. Ms. Lee, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council staff, and members of the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider a proposed amendment to the Community Planning Permit System, or CPPS bylaw, for a land municipally known as 3437 Crescent Harbor Road. The purpose of the application is to amend the town's CPPS bylaw number 062-17 to facilitate an expansion of existing non-complying two-story dwelling by constructing a waterfront addition, front yard attached garage, and converting the existing attached garage into additional living space, in addition to facilitate repair to an existing non-compliant boathouse. The application is seeking 5 variances under the CPPS bylaw for a CPPS bylaw amendment under Section 4.17.3 to decrease the existing non-compliant waterfront yard setback from 23.97 meter to 23.32 meter for the proposed dwelling addition. Under Section 4.17.4 to increase the maximum height of an existing non-compliant boathouse from 3.2 meters to 3.35 meters. Under Section 5.1.2.b to decrease the minimum interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 2.9 meters on the west side for the proposed dwelling addition, to decrease the minimum interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 1.5 meters on the east side for the proposed dwelling addition, to decrease the minimum interior side yard setback from 4 meters to 1.32 meters on the east side for the proposed attached garage. So the subject land is located outside of the settlement area, fronted onto Crescent Harbor Road, which is a private road with a lot area of approximately 2,078 square meter and a lot frontage of approximately 16.78 meter. Surrounding lands are generally residential in nature. So this slide highlights the criteria that will be reviewed by staff. So staff have reviewed the application against the evaluation criteria required under Section 1.9 and 2.14 of the CPPS bylaw for a CPPS bylaw amendment, and have determined that the proposal meets these criteria as detailed in the staff report, the SR-44-25 on today's agenda. So in addition to the comments received by Clerk's Department, we received a comment from Elderville First Nation respecting a request for an archaeological assessment. Staff are working and will consider whether or not it's appropriate to add a condition of approval. Should council approve this application, staff may include it as a condition that an archaeological assessment to be provided and completed. One letter of support has been received from the adjacent neighbor to the west, and 2 letters of opposition have been received, and one of them is from the adjacent neighbor to the east. So we are recommending approval this evening. However, if there are questions from the public or council that can't be answered, council could defer consideration to a future date. And at this point, I will just hand it over to the applicant's agent, Nick, who will go over the proposed concept. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Mr. Scarrett, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Your Worship, council, staff, public in attendance. My name is Nick Scarrett with Innovative Planning Solutions. Here on behalf of the client, representing 3437 Crescent Harbor Road, and we're requesting 5 bylaw amendments. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a brief overview of the proposed amendments and the recommendations under those amendments. This proposal is to facilitate the construction of an addition to an existing legal non-conforming single detached dwelling on these lands. In short, this proposal will add 5 bylaw amendments to reduce the rear yard setback of 65 centimeters from the existing building, increase the height of the existing boathouse by 15 centimeters to repair the dilapidated roof, decrease the interior side yard setback for the existing dwelling on the west side by 5 centimeters, and decrease the east side yard setback for the existing dwelling for the proposed addition of 1.25 meters and for the attached garage of 18 centimeters. Overall, these changes are relatively minor, and due to the large cedar hedges either side of the property, as well as the existing proposed vegetation planting on the property, these changes are negligible effects on the existing neighborhood and provide a net positive to the Lake Simcoe shoreline. I'll try to use this thing properly. All right. This image provides an overview of the proposal. You can see in purple, that's the existing dwelling. It is a two-story dwelling. And the proposed in red is the additions. At the rear, the water side is at the lower part of the screen, and at the front yard is the upper part of the screen. And the green is the new attached garage. Just below the green area in red, that's the existing garage that you see there today that will be converted to living space. The amendments include a new attached garage and slight increase to the front yard setback and rear yard setbacks to accommodate additional living area and a singular car drive or singular car garage. It will negate seamlessly with the existing neighborhood while offering site improvements in line with the shoreline bylaw. This proposal is expected to be a net improvement of the site due to the additional vegetation, especially the vegetation on the shoreline that is being proposed. As stipulated by staff in their portion of this presentation, there are criteria for variations in the shoreline bylaw under section 1.9. These are kind of like tests that we must adhere to when evaluating any form of development. And these tests give context of the evaluation criteria. The proposal is appropriate for the lands and accounts for the unique characteristics of the property, given the fact that the lands were developed at a time when the bylaw was not in place, hence the legal non-conforming property, the legal non-conforming dwelling. The potential impacts have been identified, included in those were brought up by the public in those comments. Those will be mitigated through the use of additional vegetative plantings, which will help screen the site from surrounding neighbors and will prevent the erosion of the shoreline. You see that in the site characteristics drawing earlier on in the presentation. The proposed maintains the general intent of the bylaw, which does not prevent existing uses from continuing and generally supports shoreline development and improvements. The proposal maintains the general intent of the official plan, which designates this area as shoreline residential. So there's no use nonconformity there. The proposal is consistent with provincial plans and policies, and overall, the slight expansion on a legal nonconforming building adheres to the tests and criteria and variations under the bylaw. That is very hard to read. I'm sorry. But what it should be saying is illustrating those, thank you very much, illustrating some of those deviations or slight decreases or increases from the existing structures. Now, you probably saw earlier in the slide deck that section 5.1 shows side yard setbacks of 6 meters. So this is outside of a settlement area, so it requires 6 meters, but because the building is legal non-conforming and the existing location is closer than 6 meters, we're looking to slightly amend those. So for an example, if you see the interior side yard setback for the east of the dwelling, it says 6 meters, and the existing setback currently is 2.75, we're going to 1.5, which is a deviation of only 1.25. So in the context of what has been there and what has always been there, it's a slight change. You've probably seen other properties in the area of the similar size and similar location of dwellings. Those are actually legal non-conforming structures as well because of the shoreline bylaw, and should those properties require any further development, you might see them here before you for future amendments and or through staff for class 2 variations. To note, all requested variations for the bylaw are a direct result of the building classification, not necessarily the form of development, as we're looking to enhance the area with additional plantings in line with the shoreline bylaw. The proposed development promotes efficient use of land resources while maintaining compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, which is majority single-family homes on the shoreline, and the proposed development is consistent and conforms with all levels of planning policy, and is, my opinion, subject to this application represents good planning, and we respectfully request approval by council. I would also like to thank planning staff for their time invested in this application and the many conversations that we had. We also have viewed all the submitted comments and have no concerns at this time, and would like to open opportunity to ask any questions. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrett. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding this item. No one has signed up to register to speak virtually, so I will call on those in attendance here at Town Hall who wish to provide comments to come forward to the podium and state your name for the record. Does anyone want to make comment on this application? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk, have we received any correspondence since we began the conversation?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and no correspondence has been received during the course of this meeting.
Thank you. I will now ask council if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I only have one question. That has to do with the proposed garage on the front of the building. Do we not have any setbacks, or I'm not too sure you'd call it a setback, in terms of projections in front of a neighbor? So usually we try to arrange the houses so they're kind of in a line. This now projects quite a bit further than, I believe it's to the neighbor to the right, me looking at the screen, quite a bit. And right now there's a hedge there, but if during construction that hedge dies, then all of a sudden they're going to see a large wall to that side. So do we have anything in our bylaws that suggests that that's not allowed? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, Madam Mayor. So we, because this is a property outside of the settlement area, so we don't have that projection requirement for the property outside of the settlement area and in the CPPS bylaw. And also in the OP, the bylaw says that the OP doesn't recommend like a garage projection beyond the covered porch or the existing dwelling, but that is all within the settlement area. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was actually at the property last week, and it is one of the smaller properties on Crescent because there's mega mansions down there. The property does have huge hedges along the outside, and where the garage would be going, I don't think it would obstruct the neighbors' views. So I would have absolutely no objection to this.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none, then, we'll now go to the recommendation to consider this application. Is there a mover and a seconder for this application? Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Thank you, everyone who came out for that item. We'll now go to the final item of tonight's agenda, which concerns a proposed amendment to the town's community planning permit system, our Shores Bylaw 062-17 for 1905 Simcoe Boulevard. That is also being recommended for council consideration tonight. We will start with a presentation from staff, and then the consultant on behalf of the applicant will be invited to speak. Then we will have an opportunity for public consultation where we will hear from members of the public, and you know the drill, 5 minutes, and then you can come up for an additional 5 minutes if required. After all members of the public have been provided comments, we'll then go to council to see if they have any comments. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to comment, they can email Clerk's Services. These comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a decision this evening. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda, which can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from Clerk Patty Toma on how the notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Notice for this public meeting was provided by placement of signs on the street and lake frontages of the property on February 26, 2025. Notice was also circulated to all required review agencies on February 25, 2025, and all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on February 26, 2025. Information and materials respecting the application were also posted on the town's Get Involved page.
Thank you. Has any correspondence been received by Clerk Services concerning this item?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. And no, the clerk's office has not received any correspondence regarding this application. Members of the public may provide comments or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or until council makes a decision by contacting the clerk's office.
Thank you. We'll now hear from our presenters regarding this application. First, Kirsten Morris, Senior Planner for the Town of Innisfil, will provide a high-level summary of the application. And then Nick Scarrett, Senior Planner from Innovative Planning Solutions, on behalf of the applicant, will provide further planning context. Ms. Morris.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider an application for an amendment to the Community Planning Permit System, or CPPS bylaw, for 1905 Simcoe Boulevard. The purpose of the application is to permit an addition to the existing non-complying two-story dwelling on the property. The applicant is seeking a CPPS bylaw amendment under section 4.17.2 of the bylaw to permit an increase in the ground floor area of the existing non-complying dwelling by 88.4%, where the bylaw permits a maximum percentage ground floor area increase of 50%. The property is located within the primary settlement area of Alcona on Lake Simcoe. The area of the lot is approximately 1,373 meters squared, and the frontage on Simcoe Boulevard is approximately 30.48 meters. There is an existing two-story single detached dwelling on the property, and existing uses surrounding are generally residential. So the application has been evaluated by staff in accordance with the evaluation criteria outlined in section 1.9 and 2.14 of the CPPS bylaw, which include whether the proposal is appropriate, whether the proposal accounts for unique characteristics on the property, whether potential impacts are identified and mitigated, whether the proposal maintains the general intent of the CPPS bylaw, whether the proposal maintains the general intent of the town's official plan, whether the proposal is consistent with provincial plans and that a public meeting has been held. Staff's analysis of these criteria is detailed within the staff report on tonight's agenda, DSR-045-25. We've received a comment from Alderville First Nation, who have recommended that an archaeological assessment be completed. And as detailed in the staff report, we have noted that we typically wouldn't require an archaeological assessment for a proposal of this scale. However, we are reviewing the comment further, and we may require an assessment be completed as a condition of the shoreline permit if it is determined to be necessary. In terms of next steps, staff are recommending approval of the bylaw amendment tonight if there is no objection from council or members of the public, as staff have found the application to meet the evaluation criteria of section 1.9 and 2.14 of the bylaw, and as further detailed within the staff report. And I will now pass the presentation over to the applicant's agent, Nick Scarrett.
Good evening, council again, staff, public. My name is Nick Scarrett with Innovative Planning Solutions, representing the owner of the property at 1905 Simcoe Boulevard. This property is located within a settlement area. So the reason why this building is classified as a legal non-conforming building is because the front yard setback is too big. So if this building was actually situated a little bit closer to the front property line, it wouldn't not be classified as a single or legal non-conforming building, and we actually wouldn't be here today because the development proposal with the additions meet the criteria of the shoreline bylaw without variations. It's the only reason why or here is because of the front yard setback being farther and building classification. So based on that, we've been in discussions with staff and have followed the CPPS bylaw with additional plantings in the shoreline area. And you'll probably see some plantings on the south property line, which is not required by the shoreline bylaw, but we are promoting that to provide enhanced buffer from the neighboring property. You can see the existing dwelling really close to that side property line, and we're looking to help mitigate some of that with this proposal. So this is the existing dwelling. The proposal will increase the building footprint and GFA for a 2-story addition. The porch will be wrapped around the addition on this side and continue to the back. So you'll see the same kind of theme in design here, just with the addition to the right side of the screen. Again, here is the side yard setback where the addition will be, and you'll see some existing vegetation which will be enhanced through this proposal in probably a 6-foot high cedar hedge there. So with the addition and the vegetation planting there, there'll still be available access to the shoreline through that side yard. This is a shot from the shoreline looking west. The addition will be on the left side, and there'll also be a covered porch on this side. You can kind of see like a little barbecue there on the right. There'll be a covered porch there that will actually connect roof lines to the existing gazebo. That huge, beautiful tree that's there will not be impacted by this proposal. Again, we're here seeking bylaw amendment relief for increased ground floor area only as a bylaw amendment. And the reason for that is because if you hit the threshold of more than 50%, which you can clearly see in the illustration, you must go for a bylaw amendment. Over the 50%, we're actually about 38.4% over the 50%. So you'll see that 88% looks like a very high number, but numerically, the proposal is minor because we're meeting height, we're meeting setbacks, we're actually exceeding shoreline setbacks, we're enhancing the shoreline area with vegetation. So all those kind of things are mitigated through this proposal. Another point to make is that we are actually getting closer to conformity with the front yard setback because of the angle of the municipal roadway and the front yard. We're actually getting closer to bylaw conformity with this proposal. Again, the criteria for variations, there's 6 of these in the shoreline bylaw in section 1.9. They're kind of like tests. If you're familiar with other committees like the Committee of Adjustment, I don't know what I just hit there, sorry, that might be. This proposal is meeting those 6 tests and promotes actually improvement of the shoreline area than from existing. And here's a final little table that is showing those numbers. The existing dwelling is almost 100 meters squared, and we're increasing it by 87.82 meters squared, or ultimately 88.4% increase, which is triggering this bylaw amendment. I also want to thank staff for their time in review of this application. And we have reviewed all staff comments as well as public comments and have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrett. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding this item. I understand, Clerk Toma, that no one has registered to speak virtually.
That's correct, Mayor Dolan.
Thank you. So I'll call on those in attendance here at Town Hall who wish to provide comment to come forward to the podium and state your name for the record. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ken Simpson. I live on Simcoe Boulevard. I guess my question is, when will the construction start and what is the duration of the construction?
I'm not sure if we're going to be able to answer that question, but I'm going to ask Mr. Scarrett. He's probably more familiar than anyone.
I can try to guess. pending, organization of trades, I would anticipate that construction would be maybe fall at the earliest, pending building permit review and the shoreline permit process. So possibly at the end of the summer.
Anything else, Mr. Simpson? Thank you. We'll now go to members of council, if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Drodge.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question's around the detached garage. Just in this one picture I'm looking at here, it looks like there's a roof line that attaches the existing house to the detached garage, maybe possibly a basement access. Is that the case?
Through you, Your Worship, to answer Council's question, it appears that they are connected, but they're not physically connected, so they are separate structures. And then access to the basement, that might already be existing. So I'm not too familiar with that piece of it, but I can agree and state that that garage is detached.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions and comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll now go to the recommendation to consider this application. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Fowler and Councillor Constantine. All those in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Council thanks everyone, both online and in person, for their consideration and participation, and we'll now go to the confirming bylaw and for adjournment. So could I ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to confirming bylaw and adjournment at 7:26 p.m. Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the evening.